It was a crazy race in Austria, with the battle between the top two in the championship that ended with contact, a penalty, and a retirement. But it was the Mercedes of George Russell that kept it clean to pick up the pieces and take his second win and become the 5th race winner and the 4th team to win races in 2024. There are lots of talking points and this one could be controversial, so here's my 5 things we learned from the Austrian Grand Prix. My name's Andy and this is Behind the Drive. George Russell picks up the pieces. It was George Russell who became the 5th race winner of 2024 after he picked up the pieces after the top 2 in the championship collided at the front. But it has to be said that while George Russell did luck into this win in Austria and he didn't have the fastest car by any means, he did do an excellent job this weekend for the Grand Prix. Russell qualified 3rd, albeit being advantaged by Piastri's time being deleted, and this put him in a great position as he was the best of the rest behind Verstappen and Norris, who seemed to be the top 2 drivers at the moment. Russell did well through the race, and he was in a strong position with a good lead on Carlos Sainz even before the incident out ahead of him. And this is exactly what he needed to do. Mercedes is getting closer to the front, but they haven't yet got a car that is capable of winning races on outright pace. So the drivers have been forced to get themselves into positions where they can maximise their result, and it was Russell that did that today as he went on to take the race win unexpectedly. It was a brilliant outcome for the team and driver, and a great sign of their revival as a team in general. This is the 3rd race in a row where the team have got themselves into a strong position, and that's resulted in their 3rd podium in a row as well. It's a good achievement, and, right now at least, it must be said that they're definitely a stronger team than Ferrari. So of course, it's a green box for Russell and Mercedes. Sure, he lucked out with the win, but regardless, he was still the best of the rest and ready to pick up the pieces this afternoon. The title contenders collide. It was a fight between the top 2 that was reminiscent of the 2021 championship battle in Austria, as Verstappen and Norris were fighting for the win in both the sprint and the Grand Prix. But it was in the closing stages of the Grand Prix when Norris had the faster car and was chasing down Verstappen. There are a few points through this battle that need to be talked about, and for me, the first is the fact that Red Bull put themselves in this position in the first place. The team had a really quick car in the opening stint, but as they got on to lighter fuel and continued to use the tyres, it seemed like they couldn't maintain the same pace as the McLaren. To add, the team then had a slow pit stop, with the left rear tyre not coming off initially, and the team then had to pause the release to allow Norris to come by in the pit lane. This was a real own goal for Red Bull, who are usually bulletproof when it comes to pit stops and strategy. And as Verstappen said in his post-race interview, these incidents actually meant that they put themselves in a position where they were fighting with Norris on track through the final planned stint. And as the racing in that stint began, it was messy from both drivers. Verstappen was certainly making late moves on the brakes, closing the space that Norris was trying to take, and this led to several laps where the drivers came close into turn 3. But also, Norris was making some really late lunges, and opportunistic moves where he failed to make the corner. Perhaps this was Norris trying to make up for the fact that he could have done better to defend the lead in the sprint race once he actually managed to take the lead for a single straight. But the steward's indecision and inability to react quickly to Verstappen's moves under braking perhaps meant that the pressure was mounting for both drivers, and as you'd expect, this boiled over in the end, with the first on-track crash between Verstappen and Norris since the pair became the 2 to beat in the sport. As for the incident itself, I think Verstappen rightfully received the penalty. He left Norris no space and even tried to push Norris out wide and off the track. The defending from Verstappen was reminiscent of some incidents that we've seen from him in the past, where he defends to the point where the driver behind either backs out or the pair will crash. It's this reckless driving that I'd hoped Verstappen would have wanted to avoid, but it arrived again with all the pressure from the team's own mistakes this afternoon. But what followed this incident was also telling for me. Both drivers limped back to the pits, and during this time Norris was handed a 5-second penalty for track limits. The drivers had a significant lead over most of the field and were both still running in the top 10. But Norris almost immediately retired the car once he was in the pits, while Verstappen allowed for the repairs and got himself back out there. Now of course I don't know whether the McLaren was damaged enough to force the retirement, but the team did service the car before Norris jumped out. I'm not 100% sure of what will happen with his 5-second penalty he received for track limits, but there might be a chance that that wasn't served, and it might roll on to next weekend in Silverstone. If the car was in a good enough position to drive, it feels silly not to at least go out and try to get some points, which, as we saw from Verstappen, could have been significant for the championship. And perhaps the decision to jump out of the car could cost Norris, and is perhaps a sign that he isn't experienced enough for such a close championship fight, where you have to recognise that every point counts. Now, of course, this season isn't really that close between Verstappen and Norris, but it is close in the Constructors' Championship for sure, and it might be close between these two in 2025, so this kind of experience is really important for Norris to learn from. In the end, Verstappen came home in 5th, still salvaging 10 points from his Grand Prix, which is very impressive. But perhaps what's more impressive is the fact that despite the penalty, his slow lap back to the pits, and the challenging extra pit stop for the Dutchman, he still finished about 15 seconds ahead of his teammate. And that is a prime example of the wider issues going on with that Red Bull driver lineup that is now locked in for 2025 already. So it was a moment where it all boiled over for Verstappen and Norris, and while Verstappen rightfully got the penalty, I think they both deserve a red box for this incident for different reasons. The moving under braking was downright dangerous from Verstappen, and Norris not continuing and trying his best to at least salvage some points felt immature, though of course I could be wrong about the car and it could have been undrivable. I hope that the penalty for Norris doesn't carry over to Silverstone and that he served it already somehow, and I do hope that these two drivers keep it clean when they inevitably fight each other again through the rest of this season. Oscar Piastri was so close to his first win. On the whole, McLaren looked very strong this weekend. The sprint race was a brilliant demonstration of the fact that they have two strong drivers, to Red Bull's one. The team brought upgraded parts this weekend and were in the mix once again, though this has been a track where McLaren has typically tended to do well historically. Piastri's Grand Prix event didn't get off to the best start though in qualifying, as he had his lap time deleted for an incredibly small track limits infringement. The driver was marginally over the white line and therefore was deemed to have his lap time deleted, dropping him from 3rd on the grid to 7th. But the driver did a brilliant job to work his way back up the order to finish 2nd in this race. The Australian driver made a bold move around the outside of Turn 1 in an attempt to get past Charles Leclerc. That move was a Turn 1 racing incident in my opinion, but within it Piastri also lost a position to Perez. From there, this actually triggered some of the best overtaking performances we've seen from Piastri so far in his short career. The driver made a daring move around the outside of Turn 6, where he got past the Red Bull, and then subsequently managed the pace and strategy well to work his way into a good position. What followed was another fantastic overtake on Carlos Sainz at the same corner, which was a daring move for 2nd position in the race. Arguably, without the virtual safety car, Piastri could have won the race today, and had his qualifying lap remained within the white lines, then I'm sure he would have done. But I don't think we'll be waiting for too much longer before this driver takes the checkered flag in a Grand Prix, so for me, it's a green box for Piastri today. Ferrari seemed lost. It was a dreadful weekend for Ferrari in my opinion. The team did manage to salvage a podium, but since the Monaco Grand Prix, the team have struggled to find any kind of form. The unique nature of the Monaco Grand Prix circuit suited the Ferrari car well, but all the tracks since then have been very difficult for them. The situation has been made to look much worse thanks to the versatility and pace of the McLaren and the resurgence of Mercedes during this time. This whole weekend was full of issues for Charles Leclerc. The driver had an anti-stall issue in sprint qualifying, which made him unable to complete a lap. And then he was the victim of the first lap incident with Piastri, which left him running down the order. But even without that, it felt like the Ferrari drivers were well off the pace more generally this weekend. As mentioned, Sainz did finish in the top 3 today, but without the top 2 clashing, he would have been down in 5th position, with Leclerc finishing 11th in the end. But considering this team is still 2nd in the Constructors' Championship, it feels like they haven't been the 2nd fastest team for a few races. What's more worrying is the fact that they never seem to be confident in understanding what their challenges are, and I rarely have confidence that they're on a path to solving them. So for me, it's a red box for Ferrari, who'll be hoping for more in the next few races. Haas have a brilliant race. The Haas team have been characterised this season for bringing bold strategies. Some of these, in the case of Magnussen's driving standards, have been too far this season, but this weekend the team had a lot of pace. The midfield battle has been close this season, and Haas have definitely been pushing the likes of Alpine. Today, the team went from 9th and 12th on the grid to 6th and 8th at the finish, with Nico Hülkenberg beating Sergio Perez on outright pace this afternoon. This is a massive achievement for the team, and they've taken a haul of 12 points to take their total to 19. This is exactly what the team needed and proves that they're making progress this season, which is more than they predicted at the beginning of the year when they launched their cars. So of course it's a green box for a well executed strategy from Haas and a great team finish. Honourable mentions. Daniel Ricciardo drove a strong race in Austria to finish ninth in the race this afternoon. After a difficult season and more rumour about his seat being at risk this weekend, he turned up to ensure he was the lead RB car. I think it's also worth mentioning the fact that the track changes coming into this season have worked incredibly well in Austria. The gravel traps did a good job to control track limits, and we didn't face the farcical situation that we saw at the end of this race last season. So it was a moment that we will all remember in the fight between Norris and Verstappen, and it may well be the first clash of many. But Formula 1 will head to Silverstone for the third race of this triple header, and who knows who will be the fastest.